about how to change your game screen. So for example, from your level 1 screen to a game over screen when the player dies. So in your game, first you want to make an enum called game state. And enums were explained before with the player and like different states of the player, so running, jumping, falling, that kind of thing. Now game states here are going to be checking like exactly what the state of the game is. So if they're on level 1, if they're on level 2, if the game's paused and you have a menu, stuff like that. So for now since we've made 2 levels before, we should add those in, and we should also add in an end game. End game is going to be the game over screen, and it's also going to be the focus of this tutorial. So to start using these states, first I'm going to create a method for checking if the player is dead. This is only for the game over screen. So if you're doing something else, you might not need this, and you might need a check elsewhere. But once the player is dead in level 1, then we want to track a timer for 3 seconds, and if once 3 seconds is reached, then you want to set your game's state to endgame, and then the game will essentially handle all the state changes. So in here, you want to add a game state for current state and previous state. So this will track the states in comparison to each other and prevent like your render method from resetting the screen every time. So that'll be explained here. First things first, you want to initialize it by setting it to whichever level is your first level, or like your title screen or something else. Depends on what you have. Then you can make a method called setState where you'll set the new state, and it'll just update the previous state with the current state and put a new set state. And then in your render method, you want to check the current state and change it accordingly. So in this case, we have in the first method, so I'll explain this, is that it checks if the current state is level 1 and if the previous state is not level 1. That means a switch has occurred. So for example, it was on a title screen, and then suddenly you switch to a level 1. So the 2 states are different. That means that your render method has to draw a new screen. So it'll dispose of the current screen. So for example, the hypothetical title screen is disposed of. Then it'll create a new screen depending on what game state it is and set that screen. After that, it'll update so that your previous state is now your current also your current state, so that it won't every time this render method runs, it won't try to create a new screen again, just because the current state and the previous state are different. This is the same for all the other ones as well, and every time you make a new screen, you should do the same thing. So that's all for your game class. So in this game over screen that I've made here, you have to first off make sure that your game over implements screen just like your level 1s, and you should make all the things that you want to show up in this screen. So this is simply for the game over layout. For us, it's just some text, game over, play again. There's no buttons really, because how we're going to handle the ability to play again is that we have a if statement that checks if the screen was just touched, so someone clicked on it. After that, it'll set the game state to something, and then it'll dispose of all the drawings that were in this screen. And after that, it'll clear, and then it'll ask to draw. So essentially, that means that your game over screen will show up once the player dies, and once it's clicked, it'll put the player back into a new screen. So that's basically it. You can make screens kind of based on this method. There are other input ways, so like ways of checking input, so like your input keys up, right, down, and also like things like that, and you can use that to make like cool interactions with your game screens. It all depends. Make sure that the most important thing is that you make sure you don't have a render loop continuously running, so that it's disposing of the current screen and making a new screen, like the same screen again, because that'll cause your game to glitch out or like stall or lag uncontrollably. That leads to a lot of issues. So make sure you have an if statement that checks something like this. Okay, and there we have our Mario. If I touch this, I should die. After 3 seconds, the game over screen should show up, and if I click it, so I clicked it, I should get a new screen. And that's how that works.